I can't unmute my my video for some reason, so I guess I'll just start from the darkness. I'm Jason, and I built the growth product org at Spotify, and then now I consult for a number of companies like Tinder and Output on how to build growth orgs and how to move funnel metrics, how to move users from one stage of the funnel to the next. So that's a bit of my background. I see that this is specifically called customer acquisition. I probably would have titled this more just growth in general. In the prompt that Charlie had originally given me is like, what's the one thing that the startups at this stage should know that potentially they get wrong. And the thing that always stands out the most for me, which is a little bit about what I think Zach was just saying, about what is the definition of product market fit, and what is it as your role as the either founder, product manager, founder in the company. And the way that I view that is that you are trying to figure out a habit path. Users don't just randomly use something. They don't come to your app and immediately fall in love. There is some series of light bulbs that went off that led to a bigger light bulb at the end of that, where they're like, okay, this is something that I'm going to use or I'm going to pay for. And what your job is to figure out what is those series of things. And so, the advantage of working at a company like Spotify is that that there are millions of people for whom that light bulb went off. Even if you don't know what that light bulb actually is, even if you don't know what habit path led to this big light bulb that I'm going to continue to use this, or I'm going to pay $10 a month for it, that it exists because millions of people are doing it. And then you're just doing this detective work trying to figure out what are the set of things that a user needs to do, what do they need to understand. That's what will make the light bulb go off. And if we can figure out what that is, then we got to figure out how do we nudge more users down that path. We got to pick those moments where they're not getting to those critical junctures, and we got to redesign the app and the communication so that more people are going to be able to have that light bulb moment and either retain or convert. So that's the goal. That's the goal of any company, but it's a little bit easier in some ways as a company that has found product market fit. It becomes a lot trickier at an early stage company because you don't have maybe even 100 users that are doing things that you want them to do, right? And so you're not clear what the habit path is, and you don't have a good data set in which to figure out what the habit path is. The thing that I'm told probably more than any other thing when I'm talking to an earlier stage company is that the first thing the founder, the CEO will tell me is that we've already discovered, we already have product market fit. And then they come up with some other reason that things aren't working. And I'm not saying that 100% of the time this isn't true, but I would say 99% of the time that's not true. Because if you had product market fit, then the thing would be working. And the way that when you have product market fit, and they don't really, there we go. There we go. Hello, everyone. Product market fit.
Hey, Jason.
Talk about this.
Jason?
Yeah?
You're probably better if you turn off the video because you're breaking up the audio.
Okay. The way that that you have product market fit is that there's really nothing you can do to screw it up when you have that. And so you hear these stories, in the tech media about the founders talking about typically how brilliant they were in executing their unicorn startup. And they attribute the success to their own intelligence or executional power. And this story has been repeated again and again and again. And so everyone believes that that is true. Most of the time it's not true. Most of the time what happened is that they stumbled onto product market fit. They were making mistakes left and right. The team was making mistakes left and right. And it just simply didn't matter. There was no amount of screwing it up that were going to stop the fact that they had figured out product market fit. And that's how you really know that you found it. And this is true of every company that I've ever come across and worked in. I'm not saying it's true of 100% of them, just saying all the ones that I have experience in, this is actually what happened, not the media story. And so that's the thing that you're really working towards, is trying to figure out either A, what's that habit path, or B, what is the thing that's going to actually get us to product market fit, and being brutally honest about when you really haven't found that. And the biggest mistake I see is when people stop really early, convincing themselves, because maybe they needed to convince their investors that they had product market fit already. And then they abandon that search, and then they're just running down the street trying to make the thing that they've already decided has product market fit actually work when it will never really work. And so that's the biggest mistake that I see in sort of this world of like growth and customer acquisition. I suspect, we'll see what you say once we get to questions. I'm guessing that maybe that's not what you were imagining I was going to talk about, but how about I stop there and I can answer questions and get what you guys are interested in chatting around.
I can go first. Jason, what's the reason? I mean, you kind of mentioned a few different aspects of it, but is it kind of a group think that leads people to think they've got product market fit, or is it a lack of discipline, or is it that they need to tell an investor story?
I think it's all of those things. I think a big part of it is the broken investor model that we have in terms of, you know, raising money from VCs and what's expected in the story you have to tell in order to get that money. And then I think a huge part of it is confirmation bias, right? Like you put an enormous amount of energy and resources and yourself into hoping that this thing is true. And so any indication that you can get that it's going to be true, you're going to glom onto that really fast. And I think the last piece is a disservice that both tech media and the founders who have succeeded have done to the entrepreneurial community in giving themselves way too much credit for the success. Rather than saying like, nah, actually, you know what, to be perfectly honest, we screwed that up and basically made every mistake you could, and it didn't matter because we found product market fit.
Hey, Jason. My name is Katie Nowak. Nice to meet you. One of the questions that I have is around, you know, obviously it's very important to distinguish and determine product market fit. What are some of the key metrics and KPIs that you like to use as sort of a barometer for that?
You're talking like a consumer product, B2B product, e-commerce product?
So for our business, we're experimenting, kind of beta testing with both consumer and enterprise. But any top of mind metrics that you really like to anchor against would be appreciated.
Yeah, so like the first metric to focus on is the one that you can get the fastest. So if there's, you know, if like the problem with like enterprise and figuring this stuff out is that, you know, if your sales cycle and then there's maybe some onboarding period that they can opt out, and then they're not going to pay you again for 6 to 12 months, that means there's like, you know, years between your data points, and you need like days in order to get this right, which makes enterprise particularly tricky to at least figure this stuff out. Although, you know, a lot of it you can get from your sales rate and from your salespeople. Like they will tell you whether or not there's product market fit. With a consumer application, you know, the max you want is some metric that's like a month out. You need to be able to measure like, okay, like what is our 30-day retention rate, or 30-day, you know, if it's a subscription service, resubscribe rate. And you're just like looking at that and being like, how good is that number? Right. And then you want to go step back even further and be like, is there any indicator where we can predict that to, let's say, 75 to 80% confidence on days 1 through 7? that you know, maybe not with 100% accuracy, but you know with a amount of accuracy that like this user is going to stick around or they're not, or they're going to pay us or they're not. And if you can figure that stuff out, then your iteration cycles can become a lot faster, which helps enormously. Beyond that, if you can, once you get like, okay, like we're getting them to stick around, we're getting them to pay us, let's say one time. And then, you know, I typically look like a little bit further out, right? And start looking at like 3 months retention and be like, what does that look like? Right? Can we get to stick around? That first month, especially if you have like a free trial in there, you basically have a lot of people who you are getting as basically a gym membership, meaning that they just forgot to cancel. And so by month 3, though, you've weeded those people out. You actually have the people who are like, they're really going to pay you and going to continue to pay you, which is a better barometer. And you want to see like, all right, is that dipping down below, let's say 50%? Because if it is, like, you don't have something that's very sticky. If you have something where your retention is sticking up, you know, anywhere north of 50%, ideally 60, 70%, you're like, okay, I have something here.
So what happens if you have a product that maybe doesn't have to be habit forming? Like, is that possible or not really?
Is it an e-commerce product?
No, it's I mean, like I sell a mock interviewing tool to teachers and administrators of job training programs, but like people aren't practicing their interviewing skills forever. It's like a discrete period of time when they'll want to do that.
You're saying, right, which is, I guess, and I kind of meant that. I understand you're selling a digital good, but that's more of an e-commerce model, right? Like you're selling something,
Sure.
It's like a one-time purchase. It's going to be usable for a period of time and then it's done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, so there's 2 things here. It's like, yes, you're not going to be looking at retention. What's more important there is there's some conversion rate between seeing what the words are on your landing page, the light bulb going off in their head and being like, yeah, that's the thing that I need, and then putting their credit card in to buy the thing, right? Or to buy the service. And so that's much more about landing page conversion rate, and much more heavily weighted towards your, you know, all of these things need an acquisition strategy, but like your acquisition strategy, landing page, and what is the cost per acquisition of that, and can we get the conversion rate on that landing page up, is like the entire name of your game, because you're not going to have any retention, and you know that up front is like a given of this business.
I have a question.
Sure.
What happens when it's like kind of a marketplace or a social network solution where the product experience is dependent on the number of people on the app? So I'm a dating app. And so it's very hard to tell market fit without critical mass, right?
Sure.
So what are the indicators in your mind, like leading up to getting that critical mass? Like we have a few thousand people, but for a dating app, it's still, the experience is limited given the limited number of users. So it's hard to tell if like the core product experience is the issue or just like we don't have enough users yet, kind of.
Yeah. So what's particularly tricky about a network dynamics application like a dating app or a rideshare app is that it's not, you can't even total number of users in a, let's say, 5-mile radius of each other, right? And then like each 5-mile radius has a different density of people that either does or doesn't work to figure out critical mass for your application. And so, you know, and I understand that, you know, at this stage this might not be possible, but I would focus on trying to buy enough users in one tiny little dense area so that you can start getting that information, right? Like, so like ad spends that are as localized as you can get it, so that you have like enough people, let's say in a 5-mile radius or a 10-mile radius, that you can actually start to figure out whether or not the dynamics of your app work or there's an issue.
Cool.
Hey, Jason, I was wondering if you could provide examples for those series of light bulbs that you mentioned for maybe one of the products that you've worked on in the past.
Sure.
Can't tell if you're thinking or if you broke
Yeah,
out.
I'm thinking.
Okay, sorry.
So I'm going to give you this is I'm gonna use Spotify as the example. And when I'm telling you it's completely hypothetical, these aren't the actual light bulbs. But just imagine a user comes into the application, and at a base level, like they need to understand what is this thing, right? Like, what am I being presented with? Any way that I could understand, right? And what you'll notice as I'm going through each one of these things are really basic. And one of the things that I noticed a lot is that companies skip to the thing that's the problem being something really complicated, or like we're missing some really advanced feature. And it's oftentimes the thing is it's something like the most basic part of the application, the user is not understanding what it is, right? So they get to Spotify, and I'm sure there's users who are like, I don't know, is this like a thing to download music, right? And like, nope, like it's not that at all, right? Like it's a music streaming service, and that's different, right? And then there's another set of users that are probably getting confused on, like, in order for this thing to work, like I'm used to just signing up for things and they work on my browser. But this app, you really need to download either a desktop application or a mobile application to like really get the benefit of it. And so there's probably a whole set of users that don't figure out that light bulb, right? And then they finally get into the application and they're in it. And I'm sure that there's a set of users that can't figure out how to get music to play, right? Very basic level stuff. Like they just never even get to that stage. And then some get it to play and they can't figure out the play controls, right? Like, like it's either by the bottom or you have to swipe up to get like the full screen play control. Maybe they never figure that out. They can't figure out how to go next. They can't figure out how to play pause. Like that's like a light bulb moment. And then some people figure that out and they're like, okay, they figured out like the most basic things of this app. And now we can say like, all right, the user has downloaded it. They've listened to music. They figured out play controls, and we can say, all right, we'll say that they've onboarded. And it's important to think that through for what your app is. Like, what does onboarded mean? Which just means like the user needs to, we really truly cannot call this a user until they do these things. Like calling them a user before this point is being intellectually dishonest, basically, right? So they do the most basic things. Now we say they're onboarded. And then there's this next stage of the funnel, which is activated, which means they've gone beyond just the absolute most basic bare bones feature. And they're actually using the application, right? And for Spotify, that could be something like, they figured it out how to find a playlist. Maybe they figured out how to add a song to their own playlist. Maybe they figured out their Discover Weekly, right? And you say like they've done those three things, now all of a sudden we can say they've activated, right? And what percentage of users are getting over that hurdle, right? And then you could say like, okay, if we look at the data, and we have our definition of onboarding, we have our definition of activated, the user's done all those things, what percentage of those people pay? Or what percentage of those people retain into the next month? And if it's high, then we're like, okay, we've probably covered the things the user needs to do. If it's low, then we're probably missing what those things are. We've missed like, there's something in the onboarding stage or activating stage that needs to be in our definition of onboarding and activated that's not there. Otherwise, the retention would be good. Do you feel like that answered your question?
Yeah, that was extremely helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
I have another question, Jason.
Sure.
So we're working on a new offering, a B2B offering in the real estate space. And I've been doing one-on-one Zoom demos. I booked them for a 30-minute session.
Mm-hmm.
I walked them through the product. We've been really diligent on keeping the feature set really small and focusing just on the wedge feature that we think they need, so that in the demo, I really get a feel for whether or not that feature really is solving the problem that we're focused on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've identified 2 questions that I ask at the end of the demo to try to validate whether or not we're on the path to product market fit, on having a customer acquisition, or the things that we're talking about. And those two questions are: 1, how much would you pay for this product?
Mm-hmm.
And then I wait for them to answer, and I have a whole range of different prices that people would pay. That's a indicator to me of value, of their
Mm-hmm.
perception of value. And then the second one is, who else do you think should see this product?
Mm-hmm.
Which is an indicator of whether or not they're willing to share it with somebody else, and who that person is, and if they're willing to share it with people who are kind of close relations. So my question is around, what do you think of that as kind of and I know we're kind of jumping around here, but just from your experience.
Sure. I think that here's the thing about what's useful about doing those user interviews, which is great that you're doing them. It's an often skipped step. So that's fantastic.
Many times.
The thing that you want to hear when you have product market fit is that you don't have to ask them how much it is, or you don't have to ask them those 2 questions. They'll be asking you. That's the answer that you really want. You want them to be going like, oh, when can I get this?
Mm-hmm.
How much is this thing? Can I be in the early beta? Or whatever it is. When do I have it? I need it now. When you have hit it, those are the answers that you get when you have these conversations. You don't need to ask them. By the point that you're asking them, they're probably, they could be somewhat interested. I'm not saying they're like a no, but like hard product market fit means they're begging you to use it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Jason, oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Yep.
Jason, I just have a question on how you see kind of like the defining characteristics of product market fit varying between like a physical consumer product and obviously like an enterprise software or consumer software. I'm Amanda, and I'm working on with a team of Stanford mechanical engineers. We are building re-engineered feminine hygiene products, starting with the tampon. So leakage preventing tampon. I think for us right now, we're trying to discern, is it a wait list? Is it product love? Or is it people paying for our product? Now we have medical device regulatory hurdles that prevent us from allowing paying customers to pre-order the product. So it's a little difficult, but I think we're kind of toggling between, is it better to get this product into the hands of as many users as possible and show retention and product love and not necessarily sales? Or is it better to allow or push our product for sale?
The regulatory issue prevents you from doing what thing exactly?
So we're a FDA class 2 510K regulated medical device. And so we cannot pre-market our device before it is approved by the FDA. So we can't market it or like take any sales per se. We could do like a wait list, but we can't really sell it or take credit card info per se for a pre-order.
Is anyone allowed to use it until it's FDA approved?
Not in the United States, but we've currently put together a United Kingdom product pilot.
Because they're allowed to try it.
They're consumer products regulated in the UK. So essentially just like voluntary marketing codes.
And what about like the people just like in your broad community? Like, are you allowed to give it to them?
Legally, no. And if they got very sick or hurt, I would feel very bad.
Got you. Tough one. I don't have a ready answer to that one. I don't know. Did you have like a specific question?
I
Like
guess
everything that I would do, I would run against a foul of this regulation. So I'm not really sure what to say.
yeah, I think the biggest question is just like what's more important, like more broadly, like what's more important, product love and virality from that sense, or like paying customers and a steady stream of paying customers.
And how are you measuring this product love?
Just like active users, like we give it, like giving the product out for free, active users.
Oh, and then, okay, so you can give it out to free to some people, and then they, is there a mechanism by which they can request more?
Yeah, I mean, this is after, we're just saying like we have FDA approval, we can give it to as many people as we want. I guess it's kind of like, do we focus on selling the product and doing the direct to consumer and selling as much product as we can, or do we just focus and like trying to acquire those customers, or do we focus on just getting it out to as many people and getting hands on the product?
Do you have the ability to iterate though, once you have it, because it is a physical product?
No.
So in that case, like if it was a product that you really could iterate on, right, and you could change, then I'd be like, I want this in the hands of as many women as possible, and I want their feedback. I want to talk to them. I want to see if they click a like refill me again thing or they don't, and what the conversion rate is on that, so that we can iterate and we can have fast cycles. If you're saying that you really can't iterate on it, then you have the product that you have and you just got to go sell it and you see whether or not you hit it or not.
Can I ask a quick question about
Sure.
user surveys and customer feedback? We've been doing a bunch of that. It's I sell a SaaS platform for marketers, and so we can iterate the product. And I was just wondering like a best practice you've seen in terms of incentivizing people to provide feedback and to actually complete the surveys and to really be honest and open about what is a sort of obstacle to acquiring or paying for the product. Does that make sense? Any sort of rewards, incentives, anything like that? So
what I found, let me just talk for a minute about the value of those surveys before then we can talk about like how to incentivize them. Because these are, just so I understand, these cancellation surveys?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. The thing about surveys in general for user feedback is that you are presupposing the user's answer for them. You're presupposing what's wrong.
Yeah.
And what I found in doing user research, the nugget, the insight that came from the user research session is always something that you had no idea to ask or to think about. Like they just throw you some curveball and you're like, that's what you thought? Or it's like, okay. And that completely changes your thinking. And so that makes them tricky as like as a tool to figure out what's going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So to the extent that you can incentivize them in person would be great. Like if you could do the incentive, be like, can we call you? And we'll give you some incentive.
Yeah.
Even if there's less of it, I find you get a better data set than the survey. Now on the survey itself, and it looks like we're getting kicked out.